Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 150 of Stand Up with Pete Dominick. Joining me today, lawyer and legal commentator Katie Phang. We had a great conversation, and that begins at about 17 minutes after I blather and ramble on for a few minutes. Then I've got the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. That begins at 49 minutes and 31 seconds. The great Dr. Richard Haas. That's who's on today's show. I appreciate you for listening. Let's get it started, shall we? Time to stand up with me right now. Hey guys, welcome to episode 150. It's day 1281 of our long national nightmare. 103 days left until Election Day. Let me keep these numbers going. There is a new poll that says 8% of Americans think daycare centers, preschools, and K-12 schools should open this fall without restrictions. 8% think without restrictions. 46% think schools should reopen with major adjustments. 14% say schools should reopen with minor adjustments. And 31% of people in this poll say schools should not open at all. What do you think of that? Where are you on that poll? I'd love to know. The U.S. reported more than 1,000 daily deaths from the coronavirus for the first time since May. The average number of daily deaths have been rising for most of July, and daily confirmed cases also rose by more than 64,000 Tuesday, and the U.S. has regularly logged over 60,000 new infections over the past week. Starting with the first reported case on January 21st, it took 99 days for 1 million Americans to become infected. It then took 43 days after that to reach 2 million cases. 28 days later, on July 8th, the U.S. reached 3 million cases, and now the country is on pace to reach 4 million COVID-19 cases about 2 weeks after recording its 3 millionth case. The CDC suggests that the actual number may be 10 times higher. Nationwide, the death toll is on track to surpass 200,000 by Election Day. That's reporting aggregated by the Washington Post, Politico, Axios, Wall Street Journal, and CNN, and put in the daily email that I love called What the Fuck Just Happened Today. WTF Just Happened by a guy named Matt Beiser, I think his name is. I love that email. So I highly recommend you subscribe to it. Oh, man, how are you doing? Thanks so much for your feedback on yesterday's show. I interviewed 2 guest experts, and then I interviewed a listener and now new subscriber named Cameron, and boy, did I get a lot of reaction to that. I highly recommend you go back and listen to episode 149 and that interview, and let me know what you think, because I'm thinking about trying to get him on with several of you. You know, when you're interviewing and arguing with someone about an issue and you're a listener, you sit there and go, why didn't he say this? Why didn't he say that? Well, a lot of you said that, and I appreciate it. So I want to try to give you guys a shot to discuss this guy. It could be interesting. And so check that out. That's Cameron Gabbs, and that is the third interview on yesterday, episode 149. Where I also welcome Clint Watts and Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat. But if you'd like to join me in conversation with Cameron, I think we can make that happen. I'd love to get a few of you on there to talk with him. This guy who I am referring to as a maybe Trumper. Oh, man. Let's see. What else is going on? Have you ever been really excited about something and keep talking about that thing and realize that other people probably really don't care that much about that thing? That's basically how I am about my new studio that I am building, and with the help of listeners who are literally helping me build it. Thank you to Michael and Nick, Michael Reese and Nick D. Fabrizio, who live not too far from me and who are being very generous with their time, and other people that are helping me design it as well, like Kara and Matt Elliott, and maybe I'm not supposed to say last names, but anyway, I think everybody. How could you possibly get in trouble if I shouted you out saying thank you for your help? That couldn't damage you, right? Sorry if that's an issue. I'm not editing it out. Anyway, so I'm really excited about the studio build and how much it's going to change and make the show better for a number of different reasons. I did get a text from a listener, David F., who said, the way you described the Shed Studio, it's so genuine. It was like hearing a friend realize a dream. It was awesome. Well, I think that your workspace matters a lot. And I think while you might not be as excited, if you're listening to the show, I think you might be a little bit interested simply because you know it's going to make everything better. make me happier, make me more comfortable, and allow me to do even more work than I'm already doing. So I'm sorry for incessantly talking about it, but it's a big part of my life right now, and I don't have all the technical abilities that I want to right now. And I'm sitting here with no air conditioning and in a spare bedroom in our home trying to do the podcast, and it makes everything harder when it's like 90-degree heat. So really excited about that, but I wonder if you can relate to being excited about something and talking about it. Not sure if other people really care, and I wonder how happy you are with your workspace. People are now mostly working from home, and how's that going? How's that space of yours doing? How does it lend itself to your work? I'm so excited to finally be sitting in nature and doing my work, and it's just the little things right now can be a big deal. And I guess this is not a little thing, but it's a big thing to me, and now I'm going to shut up about it. Lastly, I do want to mention that I also I think I posted it on Facebook, but you should be peeing outside. I've mentioned this before and on the old show, and my old producers were like ridiculed me, and some others were ridiculing me as well. And it's like, no, I refuse to be ridiculed about peeing outside. It's not. Listen, one commenter on Facebook said, that's gross or inappropriate or something. Like, why? Why? Is somebody going to see my penis? No. I mean, by the way, these guys that go like way into the woods, so nobody. Come on, stop it. You have your back to people. If there's no people, there's no windows, you should pee outside. You're wasting water by peeing inside. So, yeah, I am coming out as a person who pees outside, and as a person who, when he pees inside, I generally sit to pee because I live with all girls, and it just seems like a fair thing to do, and it's easier anyway. So I say pee outside because, especially in the point I was making on Facebook, it's not only when you're home, but like I was at my daughter's pool where she's on the swim team, and now they're being allowed to go back. And it's outside, and there's woods nearby, and I really had to pee. I'm not going to go in a public restroom with COVID-19 and take a piss. There's no need for it. It's a waste of water, and it's a bad public health decision. So that's it. That's the end of that rant, and this was probably the worst opening to the podcast ever. So I'm hoping that you skipped it to get to my first guest, Katie Phang. Katie is a lawyer from Miami. She's got her own firm now where she's the principal. She's also a legal contributor to NBC News and MSNBC. That's where I met her. She is so good at media, too. So good at talking. And we talked about a wide range of issues, including what I just told you I'm so excited to talk about, my studio. She asked me about it right at the top, and we were talking about our workspaces. And that's where we start with Katie Phang on Twitter at Katie Phang. Here it is.
Since mid-March, we have now lost count of how many weeks we've been working from home. And so your work environment is key. And it's so ironic we're having this conversation. So I've been subleasing office space for my husband's law firm in a city called Coral Gables, which is approximately in shitty traffic in Miami, a good 45 minutes away from where I live. Shit you not. Even though in no traffic, I could get there in 15. So you can imagine what a pain in the ass it is. But the reason why I say this to you is effective this Friday, I am subleasing new office space that's 3 minutes down the street from my house.
That's a game changer.
And I only go in when I need to because everything is done remotely as a result of the pandemic. So there are silver linings to the coronavirus, other than us actively dodging, trying to have our governor kill us. In Florida, we are figuring out ways of making the best of some funky situations. And it's kind of been a little bit of a reawakening, I think, professionally for a lot of people. But, I say this from a position of privilege, right? I mean, I am able to pay my bills and actually make money right now. So I get it, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to be down the street. So right? It's totally different.
I have so many thoughts. I pressed record like 2 minutes ago. Is there anything that you said that I can't use about where your location is or anything?
No, not at all, people. Sadly, trolls and friends. No.
Okay, so you didn't say anything specific.
We should make that a show.
Trolls and friends.
This would be our podcast. Pete and Katie present Trolls and Friends.
Trolls and Friends. That's awesome. I love it. Well, I just have. I could talk about. I think I want to write a book about commute. The commute and what it does to your entire world, your family, your work ethic,
health, your
and
emotional
your body,
health, everything.
Your body.
Just all you have to do is call it the commute, and people will get it. It'll be a bestseller right there.
I don't know about that title. The Commute does sound like a Liam Neeson movie.
Liam Neeson.
The commute.
I have special skills.
I have a special set of commuting
I have special skills of drinking coffee and listening to
the HOV
Pete
lane.
in the HOV lane with my blow-up doll so I don't get ticketed.
I commute without AC in Miami. What? Wow, that's impressive.
That's so funny. So being able to kind of reinvent yourself during the pandemic has been a little bit of an interesting gift. I think some people have been forced to have to do, and some people have had the privilege of being able to, the luxury, I'd say, of being able to figure that out.
Yeah,
so
no, you're
cool.
right. It's always really important to talk about the kind of the different jobs that are able to be done from home and how everybody's learning to do their job from home. But how do lawyers, like if you have to be, how does court work?
Well, yeah, so that's a great question. So starting since mid-March, I've been working from home. My husband's also a lawyer, so he's been working from home. And part of that was born out of necessity because our daughter's school was, you got to stay from home. Her little private school, her pre-K private school started saying you got to stay at home starting mid-March. What's happened with the court system is really intriguing. So as you can imagine, on a daily basis, I have hearings, depositions, mediations, trials, jury, and bench. And what has happened is everything is via Zoom now, which initially was a technological nightmare because there's an entire generation of judges and lawyers that are not aware of kind of the nuances in remote technology, things like Zoom, WebEx, things like that, right? So it was a little bit of a catch-up kind of run-up to this whole launch of doing everything via Zoom, but now people love it. So I've had mediations via Zoom where I've done them from home. So they'll start like at 9 a.m. in the morning and we'll still be going like at 6. And I will literally move my laptop to my kitchen and I will apologize, but I'll have to start cooking dinner. Sorry,
that is really
right?
interesting.
It's life, right? It's life. What do you want, What
would an example of a mediation be? Sorry, like what would be?
Oh, I'll give you an example. Okay, so I'll give a perfect example. Say you slip and fall at a local store and you sue as a result of the store's negligence. In Florida, every case is required, mandatory, you have to go to a mediation. That is when you have a neutral third party, usually a retired judge or a lawyer who's been practicing for a while, hopefully in that particular area of the law that your lawsuit or your case is about. And you will be with your lawyer. And now it's kind of interesting because in Zoom, we have breakout rooms, right? So you'll be with your lawyer in one little breakout room. The other side, the other party will be with their lawyer. And the mediator shuttles back and forth from room to room. When we were able to do it before coronavirus, literally the mediator would go from room to room. And basically you would say, this is my lost wages. This is my pain and suffering. These are my medical bills. I demand X amount of money. Then the mediator goes to the other side and comes back and says, well, Pete, look, you weren't paying attention and there was a sign and whatever. And so they're willing to offer you X. And then I, as your lawyer with you, we'd say to the mediator, no, but don't you understand? It was there for a while, the puddle in the floor, and then the mediator goes back. And basically at the end of the day, hopefully you come to a resolution where we jokingly say, with any good mediation, you leave feeling like you should have gotten more money and the other side leaves feeling like I should have paid you less money. But that's a mediation.
That's interesting. So because I was on the jury for a slip and fall case, I was actually the worst thing, though, I think, and you tell me because this is all legal stuff, but I was the alternate. So I had to sit through. Oh, my God. So you
had to sit through the whole thing and then you couldn't actually go and deliberate. That's horrible.
Especially for someone like me. I'm like, I have things to say. I'm a smart person. And, but yeah, it was.
Yeah, you have to be muzzled because you can't talk about it. That's tough.
Right.
Yeah.
But the fact that there was a trial in the slip and fall case means that the mediation, they may have tried a mediation and it just.
Exactly. And it failed. They tried to negotiate something to resolve it prior to trial and it failed. And sometimes you guys are so far off. People are so far off, right, that you can't actually get to a resolution. But I've done evidentiary hearings where I've had
they're asking for.
Yeah, the numbers are so far off. Like you really got hurt very badly in some car accident and they think they're not at fault at all. So they offer you like, 10 grand and you really need like 100 grand. And they're just never the twain shall meet. And so you end up going to a trial. But we've had several mediations. I've had evidentiary hearings where I've literally been questioning witnesses, presenting evidence. We've done depositions via Zoom. And you know what? It's amazing because normally, Pete, I'd have to get in a plane and fly to somewhere to get the stuff done.
So it's better for you. Is it not good for someone, any party?
It's not. I'll tell you this. It may be. It allows us to move on and not be totally stagnant in our profession. The problem is, for me, especially as a people person, however, people like or dislike that phrase, I'm very big on the human, the quality of the human interaction. Whether you and I are on the same side or on opposite sides, I need to have that component of being able to look at you, read you, pick up your vibe, look at your body language. You can't get that on Zoom. You have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I get that as a stand-up comic. Yeah.
Yeah. See, there you go. I mean, can you imagine doing your entire set via Zoom?
People are doing it, and I've been asked to do it, and I refuse because of what you just said about that.
How do you do that? Like, how do you read a room? How do you read a room on Zoom?
You don't. You really can't. And by the way, being in the audience of a virtual comedy show is also hilarious, or in the audience of any kind of those Zoom chats, which I've hosted a bunch of them for subscribers, because when you're in the audience, all you do is like look at and judge everybody else. You just stare at them. What are they doing?
Okay, so then the next question is, and so here's the other thing. So I have a variety of different Zoom backgrounds, like some that are very funny, some that are like cheesy, some that are like nature scenes. But I can't do that when I'm in court or I'm doing something for court, right? You can't do that. But otherwise, I like being able to do the Zoom chats and things like that. I think that's been a great way also of being able to keep in touch with people, which is, I think, the other kind of silver lining from the pandemic is people have really kind of focused on the quality of connection. And I've had a lot of connections that have been revived now because people have the time and people feel the sense of urgency to either reconnect or maintain connections in a more quality way. Does that make sense? Like,
it makes a ton of sense, but I think
the vibe I've been picking up with.
It makes a ton of sense, but I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about how that breaks down by gender. Like, I'm seeing men, and I'm trying to lead this and role model it, but I'm seeing men connect in a way that men never have connected, and just, talk. I've always been a talker, obviously, and love to talk on the phone with my male or female friends, but I have very few male friends that were ever really interested or good at it or would return calls. I mean, guys are more likely to text, but now I feel like everybody, as you just said, is seeking a connection, but men are doing it. You know what I use is this app. I don't want to plug the app, but I will. It's called Marco Polo, because men, I think, I'm going to generalize again, have a harder time keeping the exchange, a conversation going. So it's just like this one-sided thing. You say a bunch of things, and then the other person makes their video and responds. And it's really interesting to see how.
Oh, so it's driven by videos, like a video chat, like you make your little vignette kind of thing, and you send it, and somebody else does it.
Yep, and then they respond that way, and they don't have to feel the pressure of being like in the moment and respond, or even listening. I'm busy, I'm distracted, whatever. I'm finding that fascinating. But let me ask you one more question about like legal virtual world. I was thinking about this yesterday when I was thinking about talking to you today, which is I feel like there's always this situation where if you have a court date and you don't show up for it, you're in trouble. And I was thinking you could have a really good excuse for not showing up for your court date because everything is virtual, and be like, listen, my computer was broken, my internet was down, my shed heated up. Like
my she shed burnt down. Yeah.
Is that a thing? Like showing up for court?
Yes.
Or
no. So you bring up a really interesting kind of segue to what's happening today, because in the beginning, things were a certain way for the judicial system, but you can imagine we don't have jury trials right now. We can't have jury trials
at all.
No, I'm going to say we have pilot projects nationally in a couple of limited jurisdictions that are doing jury selection via Zoom and jury trials via Zoom now. How do you do it with social distancing requirements? Remember when you said you just served on a jury before?
Well,
hundreds of people, hundreds of people showed up pursuant to their duty to respond to their summons. We don't have that right now. And so right now, and this is important, criminal cases, not moving. They're not getting their trials. They're being held in jail, not being released because you're not having those critical first hearings that you need to have. Civil cases, we got people that really want to resolve their civil cases. I do a lot of family law. family law cases, right? It's been really hard. I mean, there's a lot of access to the system.
Do family law cases require juries?
No, those are not juries, but just getting access to the system, even via virtual appearances, has been very difficult for litigants, their counsel, et cetera. I mean, access to the system has always been a crisis in our country, but now it's become even more so, because think about this too. What if you can't afford? I mean, you can do Zoom on your smartphone, and most people, if not everyone, has a smartphone. But what if you can't afford the technology to be able to participate? What if you can't? You can still call in. Zoom can allow you to call in. But what we're trying to do, especially down here in Florida specifically, is one of our Florida Supreme Court justices has launched this pilot project to be able to see how can we facilitate getting these trials going, even if they're done remotely, so that our system doesn't totally break down. So the judges have been doing hearings to the best of their ability. Lawyers have been trying to do the best that they can do. And like I said, litigants are trying to be able to get access to the best of their ability as well. But we're all kind of making it up as we go along, because we're now at this point where we went to phase 2 reopening, but because of our governor, screws everything up. So now we're back to phase 1. So I've only been in court live in person on only 2 occasions since mid-March. And that was on a domestic violence case where in Palm Beach County, the court system required that you appear live. So that was also very scary to go to court, because it's, you're around other people, no matter how hard you try. It's been very kind of scary to kind of go through that.
I'm sure. So tell me then, we'll get out of this part of the conversation, which I think is fascinating. And I have a billion more questions about how it's working, and I'm sure it's probably working different state to state, but it sounds like most places are doing what you're doing at every level of local, state, and federal courts. But because you live in South Florida, I just wanted to get your kind of perspective on how things are going and how they've been going there. What are your thoughts on I mean, it's 6 days in a row with 10,000 new cases or something, some crazy statistic like that. How are things there? What's it like to be there right now?
It's a combination of being scary and also infuriating. I have a soon-to-be 6-year-old daughter. She'll be 6 in October. And we've talked about her before, Pete. Precocious, smart, wonderful little girl. But I'm terrified I'm going to make the wrong decision next month, because she goes to public school. She's supposed to start 3rd week of August. They did this parent countywide poll. Please let us know what you want to do with your kid. Of course, I want my daughter to go to a school, brick and mortar school, 5 days out of the week. Not only does it help her with her development, her socialization, her education, it helps me keep my sanity too. Hello, like we all have to work as well. But we have a very good superintendent down here who I don't think locally, by the way, not the big chancellor of education or secretary of education we have for the state, who I think is ridiculous. He's just like DeSantis. But our superintendent is like, no, unless we're actually at a certain level of a phased reopening, we will not do it. So I don't think my daughter will be going back to school next month. But what if I didn't have those options, right? What if I'm a teacher? People have to make money. I get it. It's just I'm terrified I'm going to make the wrong decision for my daughter. Yeah, terrified.
Well, I completely understand that. Last week, I interviewed actually the president and vice president of the Florida Education Association, both of which have become friends of mine. I got to connect you with those guys because they're awesome guys, Fed Ingram and Andrew Spark.
I'd love to know. Yeah, I'd love to have some insight into how they're thinking in this.
Well, I mean, yesterday it was announced that the FEA is suing the Florida governor or
Governor DeSantis. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, they don't have a lot of options down there, unions, because, it's a, quote, right to work state, Florida. So I guess they can't strike. Yeah. But they're pulling out whatever stops they can to try to, because like you just said, of course, they want to go back to school. Nobody wants to more than teachers. But if it's not going to work and if it's going to put people in harm's way and spread the virus, obviously you just can't do it. But of course, the situation is like so many people like you having young kids. I mean, how do you and your husband get things done with a 6-year-old? Do you just tie her up and put her in the corner?
But I'm very frank. We are very lucky. My mom, who is like my daughter's best friend, it's her Nana. My mom helps us out on almost a daily basis.
She lives nearby?
She does. She lives nearby. But for my mom, I don't know what we would do, because when my daughter hasn't been able to go with my mom, I've had her running around and we've had to shush her. And if my husband's not doing something, he'll watch her. If I'm not doing something, I'll watch her. But trying to get her to sit down and do, some math problems and do some reading and some writing and trying to make it creative and interesting has been challenging. And then also, some judges have been very sympathetic and empathetic. Some judges don't care. I mean, it just depends. And I know that every profession is having its challenges right now. And I feel so badly that there are people that literally don't have childcare options. When I hear people have their kids in daycare right now, I'm stunned. But sometimes you don't have a choice.
Yeah, a lot of times.
You literally don't have a choice.
Yeah, a lot of times. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that your mom is there. That's makes everything different. But, even that is hard, because even if your parent lives locally and can watch your kids, you don't want to put them in harm's way, which obviously you're not. But, if they have any, comorbidities or whatever,
and think about it, though. So now it looks like they may do a hybrid down here where your kid goes to school 2 days out of the week, right, and then e-learns from home the remaining 3. And then the next week they go to school 3 days a week and e-learn at 2, and they alternate, right? Back and forth. I'm worried about my daughter going and then my mom picking her up, which my mom used to do all the time, picking her up from school so she could spend the afternoon with her now until my husband and I were able to come and get her. I'm worried about my mom.
Yeah.
My mom is 78 years old. She's 78 going on 40, but she's 78.
Can't they just launch your daughter out of the school in some kind of a plastic bubble?
Like in a little plastic bubble, like a bubble? No, I wish.
She lands in the car.
Maybe if we're lucky, she would. That's why I accidentally dropped her on her head when she was little. I did something worse. I dropped a friend's baby on its head. Oh, God.
Oh yeah, I was playing with their baby, like a month-old baby, on the bed.
And you dropped the baby?
And I was like 20. It was like my first friend who had a baby, and I dropped the baby right off the. That girl is now 20 and played Division I basketball. She's doing fine.
Well, I was going to say, look, you contributed to that.
Yeah, it was all me.
The early hardship when she was a month old made her into an amazing Division I player.
I don't know exactly what questions I want to ask you, because I have a bunch of them, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I haven't talked to you in a while, and I really wish I could talk to you every single week. It's been way too long. I thought you were mad at me or something. But
what?
I don't know. Like, you didn't get back to my text. I was like, did I do or say something? Did I take advantage of her time? I get so sensitive.
And I'm sorry about that, because I'm usually really good, but I don't know. Like, I'll be texting and then I'll have to drop it to go do something, and then if I remember, I'll go back to it. Right?
Well,
I mean, it's one of those things.
Yeah, at everything, at communicating, and we've become pretty good friends. And so I texted you. This is a perfect example of just like everything that's going on in the world. I'm looking back, and I was like, checking in on you, and then I said, how are you? And I didn't hear back from you. And I go re-upping this, like, how are you? And then you're like, I'm sorry, I missed that. And I was like, I can't believe I was like, I read into that. I know her well enough to know that there was nothing. I didn't do anything. There wasn't anything. And I was thinking about it yesterday. I was like, I've wasted a lot of time not talking to Katie Phang on the record for the podcast. But anyway, I'll make up for all that time now. Let me just ask you first about a couple of things that have happened, yes, that I wanted to get your expert take on. But the Attorney General, can we talk a little bit about Bill Barr, and everything?
He's been laying low a little bit, right? He's lurking, but he hasn't really reared his head a little bit in the last couple of weeks. He's kind of been letting other people like Cuccinelli and Wolf. He's letting other people kind of be the face, like the boogeyman, right? He's letting other people kind of do that right now, I think. Like with everything that's happening in Portland and stuff, I feel like Barr's behind the scenes, like, hey, the devil on the shoulder, go ahead, go do that. It's not a problem.
Yeah, so let me ask you about that. I mean, Portland, and a lot of people are going crazy, losing their minds. This is a trial run, and a lot of people that I trust and believe are saying some pretty terrifying things about what this kind of what's happened in Portland with these secret police, these federal forces that we don't know who they are. What do you make of what's happening in Portland with these federal law enforcement members who are dressed in camouflage in the middle of a city, which in itself is so embarrassing for them? I look at cops wearing camouflage, desert fatigues in a city, and I go, you guys should be embarrassed.
Standing next to the Starbucks.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. I'm going to, from a 30,000 foot view,
mm-hmm,
you can imagine to some extent, but if you have a peaceful protest kind of situation, it's one thing. But when things are a little bit more chaotic, I get it that maybe, you have law enforcement coming in and trying to get some semblance of order when things aren't being burnt down, et cetera. But what we have going on over there is peaceful protesting. The most recent imagery coming out of there are moms, dads. I saw some pregnant women that were marching yesterday.
Oh, that's crazy.
In Portland. Just powerful imagery of moms and dads that are coming out there to protect other protesters, to protect BLM protesters, to protect others. And although people have been saying tongue-in-cheek Mom Tifa, right, instead of Antifa, they're saying
I haven't
Mom
heard
Tifa.
that. That's great.
Yes, they're calling it Mom Tifa.
Interesting.
But here's the thing. The absence of real law and order happening there is really scary. And what I mean by real law and order is you have to have reasonable suspicion to detain and probable cause to arrest. And when you get the casual response of, they weren't really under arrest or they weren't charged with anything. I mean, we see people and thank God for, 21st century smartphones. We see people being snatched up by unidentified, but sanctioned federal law enforcement officers and being taken away and being detained and held and then not being charged with a crime and then being released. And that's not constitutional. You can't do that. And there has to be, and we've seen this, we've seen the Attorney General over in Oregon, we've seen people really saying you can't do this anymore. You cannot run this type of police state. I have said time and time again, and I will always stand by this, I am a fan of law enforcement. I have worked as a prosecutor. I believe in the rule of law. But in this administration, and especially under this particular Attorney General, the federal Attorney General, Bill Barr, that has become a completely bastardized concept. It's become a concept of convenience. It's whatever Trump wants or the administration wants or Bill Barr wants it to be. You cannot have it both ways. Can you imagine, Pete, if you had unidentified law enforcement running around and then snatching up Trump protesters, like pro-Trump protesters?
I mean, I kind of want to imagine that, but that would...
But could you imagine? I mean, could you imagine that? Well, first of all, I'm sure that would end up like in some type of, gunfight, right, in the street. But it's just, it's a concept of convenience that's been created by this administration. It's how do I fit this into my narrative? How do I fit this into my agenda?
Right.
And Trump is pandering because he's on the eve, 4 months away, not even, of the fight of his life. And he's pandering to a base that says that if you can do this and you can maintain that version of law and order, then you must be the president I want.
Right. But he can't. He can't maintain that.
Do that. And by the way, it's not constitutional. You cannot do those things. And that's why it's important for people that are witnessing it to do what they're doing, which is video it, record it.
Right.
And I always get scared when I watch these videos that I see online, because at any second I'm waiting for that person who's doing the video recording to be snatched themselves.
Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that until you just suggested it. So now I'm going to be terrified as well.
Now you're going to watch it. You're going to say, oh, my God, you're waiting any second for that person to actually be taking themselves.
Well, you do see them sometimes, the person taping, getting the crap kicked out of them by a police officer.
Exactly.
104 days until Election Day, by the way. Well,
yeah, there you go. Thank you. I know. It's important to know. I think everybody needs to know that.
I mean, do you think that we're going to, this is pure speculation, but do you think that we're going to see this type of, do you buy into that it's kind of a pilot project, the secret police in Portland, and he's going to roll that out in other cities across the nation? And if so, how does
Trump tweet about that, though? We've seen him say that. We've also seen Wolf say that as well, and Cuccinelli say stuff like that as well. I wouldn't put it past this administration to try to do the same in other cities, but what's also being neglected to be talked about is the fact that a lot of the stuff that's going on in Portland is in a very, very small area of downtown Portland. This is not like the city isn't under siege. It's not on fire.
Yeah, it would be hard to get that come to that conclusion if you didn't know a wider perspective. If you didn't actually
scratch the surface,
right.
and you didn't actually try reading or find that out. It's a
yeah.
very small. It's only like maybe 10 blocks worth of what's going on down there. And I'm not saying, and I'm not condoning that it should be going on everywhere in terms of some of the imagery we've seen of, stores being looted and being burned down, et cetera. I'm definitely not a proponent of that. But I do think if you have moms that are just chanting and protesting, you shouldn't be having tear gas shot at you and rubber bullets shot at you. I mean, these are things that we're not supposed to see in the United States.
The presence of those weapons creates the violence also is something that I believe, and maybe you don't agree, but just the idea that you have a baton, a gun, a rubber bullet gun, or tear gas means you're going to use it. And by the way, I'd be the worst cop. I'd use all that stuff. Like, I mean, that's why you have to change the system and the structures around it so that people don't do whatever they can have access to doing in these situations.
But Pete, there's a reason why, as a lawyer, we're not licensed to carry firearms in our profession. Whether you are, whether you conceal carry as a private citizen, that's your business.
Right.
But law enforcement is supposed to. I have no problems with law enforcement having the tools given to them in their profession to do their job. Why? Because we call 911, right? When there is trouble or there is a problem or we're in fear and we need help, you call 911 because that's what you're supposed to do. It goes beyond just what weapons are being given to law enforcement. It's what training are they being given?
Yeah, and the culture of it all. Yeah, there's
the culture of it. Like, what are they being taught to do? How are they doing it? And then when they don't do what they're supposed to do, what's the punishment component? What's the actual, punishment from prosecution? What's the dollar punishment? Hit them where it hurts in their pockets. Where is that happening? That has to happen. That's the whole idea of, eliminating immunity for municipalities, individual officers, et cetera, caps on exposure for damages. I mean, these are the things that should be changed. That type of reform should come through your legislators.
Great point,
and it always comes back to voting, right? That's important. If you have consequence, and that's the irony, right? The judicial system, especially when I was a prosecutor, I always said in the criminal system, in Florida, we have something called the Criminal Punishment Code. It's not called the Criminal Rehabilitative Code. It's the Criminal Punishment Code. So there are opportunities for you to basically be rehabilitated if you're a first-time offender. There are mitigators for you. But if you're a repeat offender, if you just keep on violating the law, the Criminal Punishment Code exists so that there is a punitive aspect to what happens to you, right? And so I always say that how ironic that the Criminal Punishment Code that metes out punishment to people that violate our laws is not getting the same attention, nor is it getting the same application to the police officers who actually are supposed to be out there implementing these things.
Right. Yeah, there's so much more I want to ask you about there. But I also want to ask you about, and I should have you on with somebody else to talk about this, and you can choose who that person would be. But we know a lot of people in common. It might be great to have like a third person to talk about this stuff that has experience like you do. But what do you think about this horrible situation that happened in New Jersey where a judge's son and husband, or her son was assassinated, murdered, and her husband was brutally or severely injured, and her name is Esther Salas is the judge, and we now know who the suspect is. He took his own life. Do you think? I mean, being down there from Miami, I'm sure you're more familiar with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And do you think there's? I don't believe in any conspiracy theories, so I don't want to say that there's a connection. But what do you think about the Trump?
Oh, I've seen it out there.
No, Jeffrey Epstein.
I'm going to reserve. I will reserve until I see more evidence of a connection. That man who killed her husband her son, excuse me, as we've seen and are now learning, had a long history of
grievances.
Really, I mean,
unjustified.
Pardon my French, some really fucked up beliefs.
Oh yeah,
So
he's like a men's right activist and anti-woman.
He sued because of ladies' nights.
Yeah. What is the legality of that? I read that and I was like, wait, what does the Constitution say about what a bar can do?
I mean, really? I mean, he's such. I mean, misogyny is not even the appropriate term
doesn't
for
do
him,
enough.
Right?
Yeah,
Misogynist doesn't do him justice
terrorist.
In terms of the description.
Terrorist.
He is. Yeah, he's like a. It's like, you know what? He's a gender terrorist.
That's a thing, but you.
Is it? I don't even know if it is. I just made up the phrase.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
That man was driven, but he's beyond. He's not like an incel, right? I mean, the guy was married and he's bitter, but he's also just really. I mean, the phrase is he's just really fucked up. I mean, I don't know anybody who makes an entire campaign in a professional and personal way of targeting women in that way, and. It's just crazy. But until I see more proof of some type of connection there, I can't subscribe to it.
No, I don't subscribe to any of it either. I just want to know what you thought about it, or more important, I knew you would say something like that, and I just want to hear you articulate it. But Ayman Mohyeddin at MSNBC, great guy.
Of course, yeah, he's awesome.
He tweeted, "A white man with a hateful ideology, a stated manifesto, a history of advocacy for this ideology against women and feminism, targeted a federal judge and her family, and was possibly plotting more attacks. And yet, I haven't heard the word terrorism used to describe his motivation." Thought that was interesting.
Because he's not a minority? Like, is that why?
Oh,
I mean, it should be. That is
white people are rarely
terrorism.
Called terrorists.
Yeah,
or thought of as terrorists. Yeah.
It's total. It's complete. But what's amazing is, as a lawyer, he's able to file that type of litigation. Right? He's able to almost. What is the phrase, Pete? There's a legitimization of his version of terrorism by allowing him to pursue lawsuits like that. But isn't that our democracy? How ironic, right? Our democracy allows you that if you have a grievance and you think that there's an actual cause of action that's supported by that, you're allowed to sue for that. That's what our great country gives you, that judicial system is there so you can sue for that. But that is just it's just unconscionable for him. And then, you know what? I asked somebody yesterday, what were the warning signs for this guy? He had some. Remember how we always talk about the shooters having manifestos and stuff?
Yeah.
The guy had entire websites dedicated to this type of craziness.
He was on TV. He was on like Fox News, I think. Yeah.
But what other warning signs could you have for somebody like this? So then, you know what? Then what do we do, Pete? When the dust starts to settle a little bit and the investigation ensues, what's going on with this man having firearms?
Yeah, well...
Well, why does he have firearms? Is it because he's never had a history of a documented mental health problem? I mean, what does it take?
It's a really good point. Yeah.
Right? It's like I guess it's the same thing when we talk about, giving tools to people like police officers, like their weapons or whatever. How does a terrorist like this man get the tool to be able to exact what he did, which was murder? He murdered a boy, and he left this woman now with, emotional scars, her husband with physical and emotional scars. She was in the basement, and that is the only reason why this federal judge survived, because she was in the basement.
It also, what do you think about what this says about the danger of being not only a federal judge, but any kind of judge? I mean, is there a certain amount of courage required to be judges or prosecutors or public defenders in that, the cases that you never know who you're dealing with?
Yes, absolutely. And as a prosecutor, I had, a couple of not so pretty things happen when I was a prosecutor. It's your job. That's what you do. But it could also happen in the context of a bitter divorce, a child custody battle. You've got lawyers being shot and killed, judges that are being targeted and killed because of those types of things. It's the humanity of it, right? It's the humanity of it. Yeah. It's what drives you to do what you do, and it's your version of the humanity of it.
What is your take on Roger Stone's being having his sentence commuted by the president? How do you look at that? Been wanting to ask you about that.
I think it's a total quid pro quo. It was very obvious that Roger Stone has a lot of information about Donald Trump that could implicate Donald Trump and others. And he basically waited it out as long as he could. And then when push came to shove, literally on the eve of having to turn himself in, that is when he got his sentence commuted.
How can how should the Department of Justice react to that? Because you would think they would be on different pages if it were a different president, a different attorney general, and a different.
Well, you've seen several DOJ employees have either resigned from their positions, quit,
that worked on that case,
to continue.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen that happen, and they've now been testifying before Congress. We've seen Jeffrey Berman step forward to talk about his treatment with Bill Barr when he was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. People have to have voices. They need to have forums and outlets to be able to speak. Unfortunately, when you are a prosecutor or even as a lawyer, you're bound by certain things of confidentiality and privilege that you can't talk about. But to the extent that you can talk about certain things, that's when you should do it. And it's but what happens is eventually, though, we're kind of in an echo chamber. You and I talking to each other are preaching to the choir. It's making sure that that information gets amplified. But when you have networks like Fox News that completely distorts it, right? And they do it so that it can only be heard by an audience. It's almost like that concept of the dog whistle, right?
Yeah.
It could only be heard by a dog, right? It's a certain pitch or frequency that can only be heard by a dog. Same concept. It's if I send a message out and I do it and I package it in a certain way, I know the only audience that's going to hear it and it's really going to take, some type of anchor is in that particular audience. We hear it and we're outraged because it's bullshit. But people who are, Trump supporters are going to hear it and say, oh, yeah, it's music to my ears because it completely reinforces that COVID is a hoax.
Ugh. All right.
Kids can get sick and they're not fine. They can get over it within a day, according to Donald Trump.
And if you want a kid, you can buy them on Wayfair. Did you hear about that one last week?
The special storage closets or whatever. Yeah.
All right. Last question for you. And I really appreciate your time. I mean, you just mentioned Jeffrey Berman and, of course, Attorney General Bill Barr. Bill Barr claimed that Jeffrey Berman, who is the attorney for the Southern District of New York, had resigned, but he hadn't. And people probably know how that played out. But my question to you is, what do you make of the Attorney General of the United States getting rid of the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York and two other districts that really matter, and all three of which were looking into the President of the United States? What do you... And
Rudy Giuliani and all that other stuff. This is what I think. I know that it's dirty politics and it's dirty law. I know that Barr is doing a lot of stuff so that he can eliminate people that are opponents of Donald Trump. Bill Barr is not the Attorney General of the United States. I say it time and time again. He is personal counsel for Donald Trump.
He's his Roy Cohn. He's what he wanted Jeff Sessions to be.
Yeah, he's actually probably more effective than Roy Cohn is at this point in time. So what I think is what I always say, which is this. In November, I'm voting for Joe Biden. In November, we all have to vote for Joe Biden because when Joe Biden becomes the president of the United States, people like Bill Barr and other people that were the total complicit accomplices, co-conspirators, people that did everything at Trump's bidding that was wrong, they will reap what they sowed. They will have to face consequences for what they did. We will not ignore that. So if you're outraged and you know that there's something wrong with what happened, then you have to vote. Whether it's mail-in voting, whether it's in-person voting, you have to vote because that's when the truth starts. That's when it starts.
I hope you're right about that. Great place to end our conversation. Follow her right now on Twitter if you aren't already. She's awesome there at Katie Phang. Thank you so much. It's so great to hear your voice and talk to you. It's been far too long.
Pete. Good luck with your new studio space. Can't wait to see it.
I can't wait to talk to you from it. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, Katie Phang. Isn't she great? Love talking to her. And she's really so genuinely thoughtful and interested in my new studio space and what it's going to change. So thank you for that. And for everybody else who's helping, if you have ideas on what I should be doing in there, I'd be happy to hear from them because we're just getting started. But we're going to continue this week and weekend. So, all right. Now I've got to talk to the great Dr. Richard Haas. Richard Haas is the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. He is an author. He is a very well-connected guy who is always great to speak with, and I highly recommend that you get his books, including his newest one, which came out in May, The World, A Brief Introduction. Here now, my conversation with @Richard Haas on Twitter, @Richard Haas, 2 A's, 2 S's. Follow him and let him know that you heard him on the show. It's always appreciated. Here we go. There he is now, Dr. Richard Haas. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Haas. Great to hear from you again.
Good to hear your voice, Mr. Dominic.
Now, I assume you're broadcasting or you're stationed in some kind of undisclosed location, maybe deep within the Earth's core?
Miles.
Miles within the Earth's core. It must be hard not having daylight, but you'll survive.
Yeah, and the Wi-Fi, that was really good, it turns out.
The Wi-Fi a mile into the Earth's core is surprisingly effective. All right, lots to discuss with you, and I haven't talked to you since the pandemic began, and there's so many different questions, so let me just get right to it. But get to it by starting with what's kind of most relevant in the news, certainly in your world, is that the United States has closed down the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, and I frankly have no idea how embassies and consulates work. But the Chinese are obviously really upset about this and saying they are going to retaliate. And, of course, the claims are that, I guess, the Chinese were somehow spying from there, stealing intellectual property from there. But aren't there consulates like this from China and other countries all over our country?
Sure. There's consulates in any number of cities. I think we have 6 consulates in China and vice versa. Okay. I expect espionage was going on based out of there. Possibly using students who would have access, say, to certain laboratories at hospitals or universities, or in technology companies in a place like Austin. That said, closing down consulates is not a smart way to do it. China will, in turn, at a minimum, close down at least one of our consulates. It's harder for us to have windows on China and their neighbors than it is for China to see into us. This is the kind of public stuff that you had during the Cold War with the Soviets. And the last thing the U.S. Chinese need to do is to continue going down this path. There were ways if there were inappropriate things going on, and I'm not doubting it for a minute, then either you kick students out of the country or you kick individual diplomats out of the country quietly. So this sounds to me, to do it this noisily, sounds to me like something that was designed to garner attention, which, and I hope you're sitting down, Pete, suggests there may have been a certain political dimension to this.
To garner attention. So how would you articulate Chinese-U.S. relations since President Trump took over? Because it's very messy and complicated, and I would argue unorganized. And in foreign policy, I think that probably the unorganization or the inconsistency of a message is probably a death knell for a relationship. Maybe that's too harsh, but how has this relationship changed between the U.S. and China with Trump and Xi?
All things being equal, over the last, 3.5 years, it's gotten decidedly worse. But if you're asking me about our policy, the word that I've been using in terms of U.S.-China is incoherent. It's all over the place. You've got the professions of personal support and admiration for Xi Jinping. You had the United States for 3 years avoiding any criticism, for the most part, of Chinese domestic repression. You then had, in the first week of the administration, the first foreign policy decision was to pull the United States out of the about to form Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have put us with countries together. We would have amounted to over 40% of the world economy, and it would have put pressure on China to raise its economic behavior to standards that all of us would have demanded. We bash our allies in places like South Korea. We need their support to push back against China. On the other hand, recently you had this raft of anti-China things. The president calls it the China virus. You now have this latest in the closing of the consulate. We've taken a much more assertive position in the South China Sea. We're finally introducing sanctions on Hong Kong. So I would say it's quite honestly all over the place. And a lot seems to, for a while, have been, we essentially were made nice with China because the president so wanted his trade deal. We got the trade deal. it's a lot of nothing. It's to use a technical phrase, and we use in this business, it was a nothing burger. To try to keep up with me here.
Yeah, I am.
And I think now the administration knows there's no more trade deals anytime soon. So in the run up to the election, they're taking a very hawkish stance. So, by the way, is Vice President Biden. And I actually think it could be a rough time for U.S.-Chinese relations, regardless of who wins the election. And this matters. This is the most important relationship out there right now.
I was reading a report from Newsweek, other outlets reporting this as well. It's no secret that the Chinese foreign minister and the Russian foreign minister were having a chat on the phone last week. You hear about this?
Yeah, I read the transcript of the thing they released the other. I read it earlier.
We got to talk about why they released it as well. But basically, in that conversation between the Chinese and Russian foreign ministers, they said they agreed that the U.S. government has lost its mind, morals, and credibility. And here's the thing that I think matters. That was a private conversation that the Chinese foreign ministry, at least, issued a statement highlighting this conversation and went on to say that the U.S. has reverted back to its, quote, Cold War mentality. And the U.S. has bluntly pursued its America First policy, pushing egoism, unilateralism, and bullying to the limit. And that's not what a great power should be about. Now, I know we're not going to be lectured by China, but if China and Russia are saying these things and then making it public that they're saying these things, what should we think and how do we react to it?
Well, partially it's for Chinese internal consumption. The Chinese have a powerful nationalist mood to contend with. And when we do things like close the consulate, this is one of the many things I expect they will do in retaliation, putting out this kind of public criticism. And then I think it's also a way of teaming up with Russia, sending a message to us that they have options and that we could pay a price, that we could isolate ourselves as much or more than them. So look, this is tit for tatism. And I would say, again, we have legitimate reasons to be unhappy with many things China is doing, God knows. But then we want to deal with them in a way that hopefully gets us closer to where we want to get to. Instead, we're dealing with them in ways that make us appear to be tough on China. And there's a big difference between appearing to being tough on China and either being tough on China or actually getting China to mend its ways.
Yeah, great point. And I would just argue with my, I don't know, namby-pamby, pinko, pacifist mentality that sometimes being tough doesn't necessarily get what you want. I mean, whether it's parenting or foreign policy, I understand the impulse to be tough, but that might not get you to where you want to be. And it seems like that's the case a lot of times in foreign relations. Am I wrong?
Well, often you are. In this case, you're not necessarily wrong. And again, you've got to play chess. You can't. At times we don't even play checkers, and you got to say, okay, what's bothering us here? China has a long history of intellectual property theft. They do all sorts of espionage. Well, guess what? We do espionage too. We don't do intellectual property theft. So if we don't like the espionage, then we don't like the intellectual property theft. There's ways we can respond that would address things directly, and that's why you kick diplomats who are working in consulates but are acting as spies out of the country if it gets out of hand. You may want to think about not letting Chinese students come in who are focusing on certain areas where we know the odds are too high that they are going to commit espionage, things like that.
Let me ask you about another question, obviously regarding foreign policy, but American domestic politics as well. The president was impeached, I think it's fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to make this succinct, because he told the Ukrainians, if you get me dirt on my opponent, Joe Biden, my likely opponent, we will release the aid that you need to fight our enemy, I think it's fair to say, Russia. He was impeached for that. Now we see news that he has done something, maybe not as bad, but something similar with the UK, where he said to the UK, he said, listen, he asked his U.S. ambassador, Woody Johnson, the former, I guess, still owner of the New York Jets, to the UK, hey, I want you to get the British to move the British Open to Scotland to my golf course. And his U.S. ambassador, Woody Johnson, actually did make moves to ask that. Are there similarities? Is this latter instance as egregious because he's personally benefiting, potentially it being his golf course, and using the U.S. ambassador to try to force that deal? What are your thoughts?
Well, see, there must be an egregiousness scale. And I would call the use of Woody Johnson less egregious. Not that it's corruption. I call it petty corruption in the sense that he wants to use apparently the offices of the U.S. government, in this case our ambassador to the UK, to advance his own personal private interest. This obviously, I won't say obviously, this is apparently inconsistent with the emoluments clause and so forth. So that to me that's graft. That's corruption. The Ukraine thing to me was far more profound because it wasn't like he was going to the UK and saying, if he had said, look, unless you move the tournament to my golf club, I'm not going to do this or that trade deal with you, or I'm not going to provide you this intelligence or this, military thing. That would be the equivalent. So it seems to me what he did with Ukraine was far worse because he basically was linking U.S. national security to his political prospects. So I would put that much higher up on the scale of things to worry about, but they're both on the scale. Right.
The egregiousness scale, however it's pronounced. We just coined it. But
it's too hard to pronounce. We need a better name.
We do. But if I'm mayor and I tell one of my aides to go tell this guy to rent space at one of my buildings that I own, that'd be pretty bad.
That's called corruption, and it's called graft, and it goes on all too often. And we think of it as a kind of a Tammany Hall kind of thing, bidding on contracts, kickbacks.
And it's also why you would want to see a politician's financial investments, why it's in the public's interest to be as transparent as you can if you're mayor, governor, or obviously president, with where you make your money and how you make your money, going all the way back to Jimmy Carter, I guess, divesting from his peanut farm. We've come a long way since then, Dr. Haas.
We have come a long way. Unfortunately, it's in the wrong direction.
Right.
No, that's why transparency is important. Who was it? Brandeis, when he was on the court, said, sunshine is the great disinfectant. And I think it is. And the fact that we can't see what's going on, and every now and then we get glimpses of it, is cause for it. Because who knows? I mean, you never know what you don't know. And this just leads me to think there's all sorts of things possibly going on.
Right. I want to ask you about another story that's kind of unfolding right now. I don't know if you followed it too closely, but what seems to be happening is that the United States senators who are on the Intel Committee, including, I think, one of the highest ranking ones, Senator Ron Johnson, who is, by the way, a notorious conspiracy theorist, he is getting intel. He is taking intel from foreign nations directly. There are ways that this is done. The United States Intel Agency deals with these things, and they filter them out to the Intel Committee, give them top secret conferences and so on. You don't have senators receiving information, although if they did receive information, that'd be great, but you would send it to the FBI or the relevant intel agencies, I would imagine. I don't know if you're following the story, but just help me understand how it normally works and why Senator Ron Johnson may be doing a very dangerous thing here.
Well, I don't know the story, but senators should not be in the intelligence business. They're not trained. And if they get something, they're not in a position to judge its accuracy. And things can be inaccurate in many ways. They can be in and of themselves inaccurate, or they can be inaccurate in the sense of not being representative. They have no idea of sourcing, fabrication, whatever. Leave it to the professionals. So my own view is senators and congressmen have enough on their plate to do their jobs. They don't need to start freelancing as diplomats or spies or intelligence collectors.
But I mean, generally speaking, I would think that the posture would be, if a foreign nation, much less an American individual, comes to me with any information, my posture would be, what is their agenda with this information? And who do I need to share this with to vet it out to see if these concerns are in America's interest? And I'm not talking about countries that we would consider rogue, even if it's our best friend, even if it's Israel, the UK, Australia, Canada. If they're giving us something, the immediate question would be, what is their interest? Is their interest our interest? Is there a common interest? Should I be a senator?
One would think. And if it comes, I don't think it would come from an unofficial or inappropriate source if it were a serious, friendly country. We have all sorts of liaisons.
Good point. Yeah, that would look very bad.
My hunch is it's coming from someplace that it ought not to be coming from.
I think these are pro-Russian Ukraine I think that's the story with Ron Johnson.
It would be coming up from exactly someone with an agenda, someone who just that with an agenda. So I would either you wouldn't take it, or I would basically say if you've got something to share with the U.S. government, the appropriate routes, just stay out of it.
Let's talk about the upcoming election. I talked with Clint Watts yesterday at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. He had a great piece there about China and Russia and their interests in interfering in our election. And basically he's saying China doesn't really want to do that. They're not trying to do that. But Russia is, and they are trying to do that. I don't know if you would agree with that analysis or even if I'm articulating it accurately, but how do you see what Russia is continuing to do, is interested in doing, and whether or not you think the Chinese or any other nation, frankly, wants to interfere in our election, which so many people are concerned about, and rightfully so?
I think what Russia's doing is quite unique in the sense of the duration, scale. It goes way beyond the election. What they've been basically sowing division, sowing discord, putting out misinformation to damage the context in which American politics take place. And they've been doing this for years. And again, they're doing it on a scale, largely using social media. And by the way, it's one of the reasons that I have real problems with social media being anonymous, but that's a conversation for another day. But
with the problem with somebody having an account that Facebook or Twitter would allow me to have an anonymous account. You have a problem with that?
I do.
Yeah, me too. I do too.
Guy, we found something we agreed on.
Yeah, that's one. It's certainly not socks or golf.
I don't see that others are doing it remotely on that scale. Again, you never know what you don't know, but that's my sense that the Chinese, every once in a while I hear about the Iranians or North Koreans, but I think they're more interested less in doing what the Russians are doing and more in hacking this or that account or something like that. China's more interested, just for I can tell, in traditional espionage, be it for reasons of state or for reasons of economics.
Right. I want to talk about your piece at Project Syndicate. Really interesting. It's titled "The Politics of a COVID-19 Vaccine." You write, Richard Haas, even if one or more vaccines emerge that promise to make people less susceptible to COVID-19, the public health problem will not be eliminated. But policymakers can avert some foreseeable problems by starting to address key questions about financing and distribution now. I heard that the CDC held a press conference, or I think testified in front of the U.S. Senate. I think it was yesterday or a couple of days ago now. And he didn't really have answers to the questions that you're asking. I think that's the agency that probably has the most responsibility for financing and distributing a vaccine. So what is the problem? Some of the problems that you see that are obviously foreseeable right now.
Let me raise two issues with vaccines. One is when people talk about it, they talk about if and when a vaccine emerges, that's going to be the solution. And then we can go about our lives without worrying about COVID-19, without masks, without social distancing, what have you. It's not going to work that way. If a vaccine does emerge, it's not going to help everybody. It's going to have limited duration and effectiveness. A lot of people won't take it. There'll be side effects. So we need to stop thinking about a vaccine as the answer to our prayers. It will be, if and when it emerges, one of the tools, along with things like antivirals that help people once they've come down with COVID. It'll be up there with testing, with distancing, hygiene, and tracing, and the rest. But one is just to put it in perspective. It's an important tool, but it's not a solution. The other is, if and when a vaccine does emerge, getting at what I was writing about in the article, think about it. We got 8 billion with a B people on this planet. Well, if they only need one dose of the vaccine, well, that's 8 billion doses that would have to be produced, put in vials, transported, administered, what have you. Just say you need 2 doses. Okay, well, do the math. That's 16 billion. Just say you need it every 6 months or every year as a booster. Or what happens when the vaccine changes? What happens to the hundreds of millions who, for whatever reason, don't take it? So who's going to pay for it? Who's going to decide the queue? To produce 8 billion doses, you don't produce 8 million doses in a day or in a week or in a month. It might take 6 months. It might take a year. It might take a year and a half. Well, who decides what order people get in the queue? Is it healthcare workers?
Yeah, go ahead. List who you would think you would prioritize. Healthcare workers would be first.
There's firemen. There's policemen. There's military. There's teachers. We have to decide. It's an interesting, almost conversation about how we value people in our society. Do you help the elderly? Well, they're more vulnerable. On the other hand, they're elderly. Maybe you help kids. It's an interesting social conversation. What about people in other countries, or do we help 325 million Americans first if it's ours? What happens, by the way, though, if it's not ours? If we haven't made any commitments to help others, and this ends up being invented somewhere else, say in China or Britain, why do we think we're going to be at the head of the queue? Is it maybe in our interest to make some kind of a statement about the global availability of a vaccine? So even if it's produced here, and we'll make X percent of it available elsewhere. I'm shocked at the lack of conversation. I don't hear journalists asking the president. I don't hear the president or the CDC or the head of Health and Human Services talking about it. I don't hear Congress doing hearings on it. Maybe I'm missing something here, Pete, but this seems to me to be a pretty big issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen it either. It's a really thoughtful piece that you wrote here, and you laid out some of the concerns there. And it's very, very important. I mean, as the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, I would imagine you automatically get 10 doses. And I'm just wondering where I am on your priority list. How will you be doling them out?
You'll get the 11th.
I'm just going to get like a slush puppy or something from you. Like, sorry, we ran out, but here's a bottle of champagne. Good luck. So, yeah, I mean, I also think, and I don't think you addressed this in the piece, but my biggest concern is that the conspiracies have dominated and spread almost as fast as the virus, and maybe as a result of the virus, to the point where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is seen as suspect. They're part of a vaccine, a COVID-19 vaccine global access facility organization that you mentioned in your piece, along with other organizations, the World Health Organizations, other foreign governments. But there is a crazy conspiracy flying around the world that Bill Gates is somehow benefiting from this, and he wants to make money off of this, which of course is so egregious to those of us. You can like or dislike Bill Gates or the amount of money he has, but he has spent much of his life now, he and his wife and his foundation, fighting disease all over the world, saving millions and millions of lives. That's what he has been spending most of his time, I think, and certainly his money doing. Yet people are suspicious. And if they are suspicious of not only that, but of this president and the speed with which a vaccine might be developed, I don't hear enough people addressing the fact that you need a certain percentage to get herd immunity, and we're not going to be anywhere near there because people are going to be so suspicious. What do you think?
Well, the accusations against Bill Gates that's just nutty. And he doesn't need the money. As you correctly say, he's given away tens of billions of dollars in this global fight against
tens of millions of lives.
It's been worthy stuff, and it's admirable. And this is a country where you can get fantastically wealthy, and it's great when fantastically wealthy people essentially give away most of it. You could probably scrape by on just $1 billion or $2 billion. I could not. You should see what my dog eats. Diamonds. She eats diamonds, Haass. That ain't cheap. That ain't cheap. I mean, you probably still could scrape by if you had billions.
Maybe.
Maybe. That's just crazy stuff. But having said all that, I forgot what you asked me.
Well, just about the concern with what percentage of people we need to get a vaccine, and what percentage is skeptical of vaccines in general.
Well, you need as many people. You need the percentage high because you have to assume that the duration of the immunity is finite. And so that means people will become vulnerable. So if you have a situation where most people do not get the vaccine, this virus will never go away.
You wrote a book about domestic politics a couple of years ago, not just an expert on foreign policy. And I'm trying to look up the exact title of that book right now.
Foreign Policy Begins at Home.
There it is. Foreign Policy Begins at Home. So my question to you is, as a guy, I'm not sure if you've ever identified with the Republican Party, but you worked for H.W. Bush. You've got plenty of conservative leanings. You're. I don't even put you in a box, and I don't like labels in general. But my question to you is, given your long, illustrious career working with folks in Washington and Congress and in the White House. What do you make of today's Republican Party? What do you so many Republicans, respectable Republicans, commentators, former Republicans have said they don't recognize this Republican Party for any number of reasons. What do you say?
That's what I say. I don't recognize it. It's not the Republican Party I joined. I remember Ronald Reagan once said, why I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. That's increasingly how I feel about the Republican Party. And what worries me is increasingly it looks like it will persist regardless of what happens this November or 4 Novembers from now, that Trumpism and a lot of its priorities and values seems to have taken hold of the Republican Party. And the Republican Party I joined more years ago than I can count now, with people like 41 as well as Reagan and others who stood for balanced budgets for the most part and limited government, a smart, strong foreign policy. Those Republicans, seem like they're in museums now. And you look at Mitt Romney. How many elected Republicans at the national level have any resemblance to Reagan or either President's Bush? And the answer is there's a handful. And people like Kasich have recently, are out of power now. This is a very, very different. Is there
any policy that you look at or even comment or policy or vote or anything that you look at and say, how could a Republican support such a thing?
I say that every day. No, I mean, whether, a lot of the of what's going on. I mean, now we have, there's a billion things now about whether it's testing or Fauci or whether it's sending these federal troops, quote unquote, to Portland and possibly to other cities. What happened to Republicans who stood for restrained government, who believed in things like states' rights and individual rights? What happened? They lost their copy of the Constitution. I just don't understand.
No, they still have it. It's just it gets Sharpie all over it.
Oh, I don't know. It's but anyhow, this is not the Republican Party in any identifiable sense. But certainly, I mean, one's seeing elements of the protectionism, one's seeing elements of the isolationism. There's historical antecedents of that. There's a little bit of a big governmentism, which again goes against what the Republican Party said. But this is a strange amalgam, I guess is the way I'd put it. Very much an extension of the personality of this individual. What's surprising me, though, is as I see, there's like a dozen people who seem to be positioning themselves for the next round of Republican presidential politics, some in the Senate, some not. I'm surprised by, at least at the moment, most of their public positioning is to be largely consistent with the president.
Surprising indeed.
The only person I've seen, I guess the two people I've seen who are conceivable, one would be Mitt Romney, who would not, and the other would be Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland.
Republican
are the
governor,
only people in public life who, on the Republican side, who seem not to be positioning themselves as essentially echoes of the president.
Right. Well, I appreciate your time so much. Always great to have a conversation with you, and even better to record it and share it with others. Dr. Richard Haas, the President of Council on Foreign Relations. Get his books, follow him on Twitter, and sign up, be a member. Thank you very much for joining me, as always, my friend.
Hey, take care, Pete. Be well.
There he goes, Richard Haas, the President of the Council on Foreign Relations. Always a great sport, great sense of humor, and a great source of information on foreign policy and foreign relations, with a tremendous amount of experience. And while we haven't always agreed in the past on things, what does it really matter? He is the expert, and I'm just a wise ass. But I love talking to him. And his book, the newest book, is The World, A Brief Introduction. Go check it out. Follow him on Twitter. And that is the end of episode 150 of Stand Up. I appreciate you listening to it and telling your friends about it and giving a rating and hopefully signing up for a paid subscription. Have you signed up yet? If not, let's go. It is patreon.com/Pete Dominick. For as little as $5 a month, you can sign up and be a part and support all of the work I'm doing every day, which takes a lot of resources when you're just a one-man show, which is exactly what I am, and I'm needing it. I need the support. Can't sustain the podcast without it, so please consider a subscription to independent media, which is a lot different than corporate media, and I'm planning to talk a little bit about that tomorrow. All right, that's it. No, you're not alone. I had a rough day myself today. A lot of downs today and a lot of frustrations, but bouncing back quick, staying in the moment, and it's so great to know that I've got you out there to talk to and to hear from and to support me like I am doing my best to support you. So thanks very much for listening. You're not alone. I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.